Hey everyone, welcome. It's Baron. Well, it looks like these Ascendancies for the upcoming Legacy of Phrecia Path of Exile 1 event are coming pretty quick now. So, just yesterday we got the first two Ascendancies, the Harbinger and the Gambler, and now we've got another two. So the Harbinger was a Witch Ascendancy, replacing one of the other ones. We can no longer ascend to the usual 19. We're ascending to all new 19 just for this one event. So we had the Witch had the Harbinger, the Duelist had the Gambler, and now just today another two have been revealed. We've got for the Templar, we've got one that was initially advertised as being called the Disciple of the Trialmaster. It looks like they might be renaming that to be Architect of Chaos. And then we've got the Servant of Arakaali. And if the two that they released yesterday were fun, these are ridiculous. So these are, from what I can see, super powerful. This first one would take a very specific type of build to use it well. But these are crazy, so let's go through them. Like before, I'll start 12 o'clock at the top and go clockwise. I think I've got my head out of the way of these this time. We had a little bit of an issue with that in the last video. And this time I'm also going to call out cases where one node is locked behind another, because I think that's important. So starting at the top with Chaos Reigns, +3 to all level of all Vol skill gems. That's a no-brainer. So this is demanding that you run just your main skill is a Vol skill, and the main gem should get the levels from this as well, I think. But regardless, the rest of this Ascendancy is making it so that you can use Vol skills more easily. If you're not familiar, if you're mostly from Path of Exile 2, a Vol skill is a specific outcome of corrupting a skill gem. One of the outcomes is that you add on this bonus skill on top of the initial skill. So you can use both the initial regular skill and the Vol version, which is kind of like an ultimate move in other games where you have to build up to it over time, either by killing a bunch of weak enemies or hitting a strong enemy several times, and then you will unlock the ability to use the Vol skill once. And as you'll see throughout this Ascendancy, this whole thing is about making it easier to do that. So Chaos Reigns is the first one, and it's just giving you 3 levels to all skill gems. That's a no-brainer if you've got no other nodes to take. Now I will note that this is actually at the pinnacle. So there are actually 2 pathways that you can use to get up here. You can go either to the left or to the right, and either of these will allow you to take the +3 level of all skill gems. On the left, you've got Fever of Corruption, 50% increased duration of Vol skill effects. So some Vol skills are instantaneous and would not benefit from this, like Vol Arc. Others, like I'm thinking of Vol Earthquake, I think is duration based, could gain a lot from having increased duration. Vol skills require 50% reduced souls per use. So the souls, capital S there, that is the resource that you build up by killing weak enemies or hitting strong enemies. So this is just going to make it so that, yes, there is downtime while you are refreshing your number of souls. You have to kill enemies some other way, but you have way more uptime and way less downtime from this node. On the other hand, if you don't care about the duration, if you're not using a duration-based Vol skill, maybe you go to the other side. You go on the right. Depose Order is the other pathway you can take up to Chaos Reigns. 50% reduced soul gain prevention duration. So it's super complicated wording. That's just, there's a cooldown period. Once you have used a Vol skill, there is a brief cooldown period before you can start gaining souls again. And now, this, obviously, the goal would be to get it to 0, if at all possible. This is reducing it by a large amount, and it's also massively 286% increased Vol skill critical strike chance. That is super compelling. Where else are you going to get that much crit on a single node? That's crazy. And then in the middle of them all, right at the top, underneath Chaos Reigns, this one you do not need to take it to get anywhere else, and you do not need to take anything else to get this. It is a one-off, is Glimpse Chaos. I'm sorry, you can see it listed at the top right there. This is another crazy one, and you're going to see some other pieces of this Ascendancy would play into this. So Glimpse Chaos says 8% increased maximum life for each corrupted item equipped, 12% increased maximum energy shield for each corrupted item equipped. So a lot of upside so far, with the downside for -4% to all resistances for each corrupted item equipped. Now, I misread this the first time I saw it and thought it was talking about -4 maximum resistances. And I was like, great, we'll just counteract this with lore weave. It's not saying that at all. It's just saying -4 to all resistances for each corrupted item equipped. So this is the equivalent of another one of the end of Act 5, end of Act 10 resistance penalties that you can overcap that. You can overcome that. Yes, it comes at a cost. You have to use some of your suffixes to overcome that, just like we saw with the Gambler Ascendancy that did something similar. But man, the upside for this is crazy if you can manage to overcome that downside. So if you are using either a one-handed shield or 2 one-handed weapons, then that means that you have 10 items normally, plus for all of these effects that count corrupted items, a heist trinket counts towards that. They are corrupted by default, and if you have unlocked that slot, which is going to be totally mandatory for this class, clearly, then you have 11 slots, meaning if you can overcome a -44% to all resistances, which you should be able to do, especially once you've got a mage blood, you're taking 88% increased maximum life, and 12 times 11, which I'm too stupid, so I will put it up on the screen because I'm not doing it in my head right now. Sorry, but a lot of life and energy shield. And what this would lend itself to is, now, unfortunately, unlike Path of Exile 2, something like Ghost Rive will not convert your life to energy shield if you're going Chaos Inoculation. It would attempt to convert it once you've already gone down to 1 life from CI. That's different from Path of Exile 2, where the conversion happens first. But if you don't go CI, if you take some other method of either taking your chaos damage to your energy shield, like with a Chevron's Wrappings or with Esh's Visage shield, something like that, then you can benefit from both the life and energy shield. Or you can do what a lot of the, this is a Templar class, right? Well, the Inquisitor, a Templar class from the normal Ascendancies, would make use of the Corrupted Soul keystone, right? You get it from the replica Soul Tether belt, is what I'm thinking of. That's what I'm going on my belt. Replica Soul Tether belt, so that you split the damage between life and energy shield, and then you can regenerate or recover both simultaneously. So anything like that. There's a lot of possibilities for Glimpse of Chaos, what you could do with it. But a huge amount of extra life and energy shield if you can overcome the sizable but manageable downside. So to keep going, we've already covered Depose Order. Let's go down to Impure Blood. Skills cost life instead of mana. Now, let me draw your attention to the fact that this should not be considered in isolation. Yes, it's a cool effect. It's maybe not worth an ascendancy point, but it needs to be considered in the context that it is gatekeeping the path to Hewn Flesh beyond it. And Hewn Flesh says, skills reserve life instead of mana, 100% increased life reservation efficiency of skills, so you can reserve more auras and other skills with your life. Well, if you want to use this, if you want to use skills, if you want to use skills reserve life instead of mana, that's going to be tough to balance with skills cost life. You can't do what you would like to do and reserve your life all the way down to 0 and just rely on your energy shield or mana or whatever, because it's mandatory. You have to take the node that says skills cost life instead of mana. Well, we're looking at an ascendancy that seems to me custom designed to get around that limitation. Vol skills do not cost life or mana or anything else. They cost souls, and that's all they cost. So if you can find a way to go effectively infinite with your Vol skill, then you've completely negated the impact of Impure Blood, and you can just reserve all of your life and all of your mana. I don't know, use Energy Shield as your main pool. Convert with Ghost Rive, like I was talking about earlier. Something like that. There's also the possibility, if you don't intend on leaning wholly into the Vol theme, which seems a little silly, but there's some other things you can do with this ascendancy. If you want to use a normal non-Vol skill, just find a way to reduce the cost to 0. There are a variety of methods of reducing cost, and if you can get the cost to 0, then you can reserve most of your life, provided, again, that you have some way of directing that damage to your energy shield or to your mana. But anyways, there's a lot of possibility here. There's so much theory crafting that we can do with this. Let's move to the next one, dissolution. Now, this is important because that name should ring a bell if you're familiar with Path of Exile. This shares half the name and half the effect of the item called Dissolution of the Flesh. Let's take a look at it. Dissolution of the Flesh is a jewel that you can place in a socket on your tree. It says, for starters, the same thing. Remove all energy shield. Life that would be lost by taking damage is instead reserved. Now, this has two differences. Number one, Dissolution of the Flesh requires you to take no damage for 2 seconds before you can start unreserving the life. Dissolution, the Ascendancy node, only requires you to take no damage for 1 second. It's literally twice as good. It's twice as easy to just take a step back from the combat and then boom, you're ready to go again. But the other thing is Dissolution of the Flesh gives you 20 to 30% more maximum life, not increased, more. If you're stacking life, you're getting well over 150% increased on your tree, plus I'm sure a bunch of flat and increased life on your gear. And then to get a source of more, like Dissolution of the Flesh or like Blood Magic on the skill tree, is a huge multiplier, because just like everything else in Path of Exile, you get flat, then you multiply that by increased, and then you multiply it by more. So if you're taking Dissolution, the Ascendancy node, instead of Dissolution of the Flesh, you're losing access to that negative 20 to 30% more life. So here's my question. Here's the important thing that I want to know. If I want a free 20 to 30% more life, can I simply throw a Dissolution of the Flesh into a jewel socket? I've already got the other effects taken care of. Or will one of two downsides happen? Number one, will it revert my 1 second to 2 seconds? Will it overwrite the 1 second needed to regain my life up to 2 seconds? That would be terrible. Even worse, probably, in my estimation, would be if the life that would be lost by taking damage is instead reserved. If both of these are active at the same time and both of them are reserving your life for the same damage, so I take 100 damage from an enemy and the Ascendancy reserves 100 life once and the Jewel reserves 100 life once, that would be unusably bad. So we'll see. There are versions of that are amazing, versions that are maybe usable, and versions that are totally not usable. Next and last up for this Ascendancy, Forbidden Secrets. And if you're not familiar with what those words mean, it is because they are the names of keystones, but they are not keystones that you can normally get. So let's take a look at them. Shepherd of Souls is one of them. And it states, Vol non-aura skills, so some Vol skills are auras, but all the other ones, your active skills usually, have 80% less soul cost. That's huge. That's crazy. You're effectively going to be re-upping these with a kill here and there. Vol non-aura skills have 100% increased soul cost per Vol skill used in the past 8 seconds. Now that's that's a little bit more like it. Note that we are dealing with two different types of calculation here. 80% less is part of that less more multiplier, and then 100% increased per Vol skill is part of that increased decrease, or increased reduction, sorry, rather. Now, with it being so high, 100% increased per Vol skill used in the past 8 seconds, they're going to be comparable there. So again, ideally, you're trying to game this, right? Is there some way that we can get up to 100% less soul cost? Because in that case, it doesn't matter how much increased it is, because I think that if you've got 100% less, it's just 0. 100% less of anything is going to be 0. So I cannot recall where the other sources of less, and so I'll see if I can add something in to the video in post, so to speak. But this is a big trade-off unless you can game the system, right? So this is one half of an Ascendancy node, is that you're getting Shepherd of Souls. The other half of the Ascendancy node is that you're getting something called Everlasting Sacrifice. You cannot take one without the other. You have to have both. And this says you normally get it on the Malxadel's Machination Shield, and you What it says is when you reach a full energy shield, sacrifice all energy shield to gain plus 5% to all maximum resistances for 4 seconds. So the entire purpose of this, like the game you play when you put Moxidal's Mechantation on, at least the POE 1 version of it, which is very different from POE 2, you're trying to constantly bounce your energy shield back up to full and back down again. And there are like some complicated mechanics for doing this, but normally you're doing it in the context of all these other keystones that come on Moxidal's Machination on the shield. And so it'll be a different set of calculations. How would you intend on doing this? Would you maintain a very small amount of energy shield and just have a gain ES on hit jewel? Yeah, like a gain ES on hit jewel, and then also something that deals like a tiny bit of self damage to you, something like that. And then you could constantly just have plus 5 to all maximum resistances from this. But the crucial thing to keep in mind is that this is not optional to build around. Like if you want to take Shepherd of Souls, you have to take Everlasting Sacrifice. One and the other go together. So in any case, there's just so much possibility here. I'm in love with this, not because I think you could just throw this at any build and have it be good, but because this is a theory crafter's dream. Like there's just so much minutia, and I sense somewhere buried in here is the possibility to do shenanigans, the possibility to go infinite at something. So I'm looking forward to trying figuring it out. Let's go to the next Ascendancy though. Nice. Sorry about that. So the Servant of Arakaali is a shadow ascendancy, so it'll be replacing, the 3 we have right now are Assassin, Saboteur, and Trickster. And so this will be one of those instead. And let's go through and talk about why this is busted. Now, starting at the 12 o'clock position as usual, grants level 20 penance mark. That looks very unassuming. It looks underwhelming, right? So if you're unfamiliar with Penance Mark, it first got introduced as one of the Affliction Ascendancies in Affliction League, and it is a Mark type curse, so it cannot coexist with other Mark type curses. And it says curse a single enemy, causing them to spawn multiple phantasms when hit. The phantasms will be allied of the marked enemy with the same monster level. They cast a projectile spell which deals physical damage and are immune to curses and knockback. It can be attached for a total duration of 3 seconds, and whenever the cursed enemy is hit, so it's going to be a boss, of course, you're going to curse some unique boss of this, they will spawn 3 shackled phantasms when hit, no more than once per second. So this is a very long way of saying this is, in theory, a way to use skills that require killing enemies in a single target situation. This allows you to force a monster to spawn adds that you can kill and gain access to it. So you can probably see where the rest of this Ascendancy is going. I would just say that from what I've heard, I've never used this because I heard that it was a little janky. I've heard that it's not always easy to get close to the spawned enemies and kill them. So I would have to play with this, like actually play with it in game and see how it feels. And maybe they'll make some fixes to it, I don't know. But the idea is that you're not totally locked out of doing damage to a boss if all of your damage relies on doing something on kill. So, speaking of which, let's move on. Broodguard, trigger level 20 raised spiders on kill. Now, maybe if you've played Path of Exile 1 before, this sounds very familiar to you. You say, oh, that's basically Arakaali's Fang as an Ascendancy node. It is not. There's something that makes this better and something that makes this worse. And so we'll have to see the math, we'll have to see the actual numbers on it to see how it plays out. What makes it better is that Arakaali's Fang, which is a dagger, only triggers level 1 raised spider on kill. So first reaction is like, oh my god, level 20 versus level 1, this is insane. This is a nutty skill. Hold the phone. Again, remember, if you've only played or mostly played Path of Exile 2, crucial difference between the two games is that you cannot support skills that you get from Ascendancies. There's no slots associated with them. So you're using this in isolation. There is no minion support. There are no support gems for this whatsoever. You are relying solely on the raised spiders themselves. Maybe those two things counterbalance. I do not know. But let's move on because we're getting to some even more ridiculous stuff that will play nicely with raised spiders, but not only with raised spiders. There's a lot of shenanigans here. So next up, skin crawlers. Minions have a 50% chance to poison enemies on hit. That's crazy. Stacking poison damage on minions has always been difficult. You've been required to either go with a very particular weapon or socket your minion gem into the Dendrobate armor, which has a chance to poison support built into it, something like that, or just give up a support gem and use chance to poison the gem itself. So getting 50% chance to poison just right off the bat is enormous. And then 10% chance to inflict withered on hits. So withered is the debuff, stacks up to 15 times, causes enemies to take, I think it's 6% each more damage per withered stack. So really scales to the moon. And on the skill tree, you can get things that increase the effect of withered. So 10% chance to inflict withered on hit, even though withered only lasts for a couple seconds, if you're doing a minion army swarm kind of a build, there will be constant uptime of all 15 wither stacks with 10% chance on hit on a big boss. That will not be a problem. You're talking about drilling the enemy dozens of times per second with all these minions, so it's no problem there. So that's crazy. And it is the gatekeeper node to neurotoxin. Minions have plus 5% critical strike multiplier per withered debuff on enemy, so awesome. The unique enemies, again, they're going to constantly be at 15, so that's 5 times 15 right off the bat. It's 45, right? Nope, wrong. 75? There we go. That's better. Minion's base attack critical strike chance is equal to the critical strike chance of your main hand weapon. Like, good lord. How many times can I say it? But, like, this is stuff that is, like, you give up a whole weapon slot to do something like this. You can use any weapon you want. You can pick whatever you want and get your minion's base attack critical strike chance. Like, you're gonna be able to get your minion's critical strike chance to 100% with this build, which is crazy. Now, there is some negative synergy with the fact that you have to pass through skin crawlers, which maybe not negative synergy, but just not quite synergy, where skin crawlers is relying on poisoning the enemy, but poison does not take into account the damage from critical strike multiplier unless you take perfect agony, and I don't believe that applies to minions. So we'll have to figure out what the best way to work this is. All right, I'm curious enough. I'm just triple checking that perfect agony. Yeah, it just applies to you. There's almost never anything on keystones that it relates to minions. Just want to double check. So, yeah, we'll have to think about that. How do do you have to pick one or the other? Do you do a kind of a weird hybrid where you're doing both crit and poison? Who knows? But these are both independently extremely strong, and you can do whatever you want with them. So next up, Silk Dancer. Just as an aside, amusing name, because if you pay any attention to the actual plot, the story in Path of Exile 1, which I know not a lot of us do, Silk is the name of the character who gets eaten and his head stuck on a spike by Arakaali, the spider. So that's a fun little nod there. Of course, spiders weaving silk is not, that's a known thing. That's a known metaphor, phrase. So his name really is more of the wink wink nudge nudge reference, that he was always going to get consumed by a spider because his name was Silk. Anyways, not the point. This says enemies affected by your spider's webs deal 15% reduced damage. Enemies affected by your spider webs have negative 15% to all resistances. Why is it talking about spider's webs? Well, normally the aspect of the spider skill is something that you get from an item, from something that you beastcraft onto from beating the boss Phenumus. In this case, you have to pass through a node that says grants level 30 aspect of the spider skill, which is the highest that it can be on an item. So you're getting the best version of that skill. It does have a reservation, so keep that in mind. It is a constant aura effect, but you do have to pay for it to reserve it. You have to manually right click it and say, okay, I'm reserving this. But if you are doing so, which you're gonna if you take this path, it will quickly, whenever you're in the presence of enemies, splat 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 and throw webs at them in rapid succession. So just as long as they're affected by one web, it's not like it multiplies by the number of webs. So they'll deal 15% reduced damage and have negative 15% all resistances. That's still good because all resistances, it doesn't say elemental, so you could take this and play nicely with the poison or the chaos damage elsewhere on this tree. It's actually going to be hard to choose which of these to take because they all play so nicely together. Speaking of which, next up, the other path you can take after Aspect of the Spider, you could take one or the other or both, is grants level 15 Envy skill. Envy has no reservation. Again, this is nuts. You would give up your amulet slot for this. Like, it's crazy. This is the effect of one of the All's Uprising amulets. So Envy is a skill that you cannot get anywhere except through items. One of the Breach swords gives it, United in Dream or Severed in Sleep, can't remember which one gives it. Is it both? But All's Uprising also gives it. The swords say that you have to reserve the mana to have the aura. The amulet does not, and the Ascendancy does not have to reserve the mana for the aura. Envy is a skill that provides flat chaos damage. So Malevolence is often used as an aura with poison builds. Envy is an aura that can be used either with poison builds or chaos builds that are just going for crit, which you could do with Neurotoxin down there. I spent a lot of time a league ago trying to put together a theoretical poison minion build, different than the common SRS one, and I think this could be a fun thing to take a look at. But anyways, let's go ahead and take a look at the last Ascendancy note on this. Fatal Bite. Gain 30% of physical damage as extra chaos damage while at maximum power charges. 20% chance to gain a power charge on hitting an enemy affected by a spider's web. So this is the side that you would go to if you wanted to make use of that Envy skill, that Silk Dancer, that Thread Spinner, if all of those you wanted for yourself rather than for your minions, which is everything else. Everything from Weaver's Contrition all the way down to Neurotoxin is straight minions. But if you wanted to keep to the left side of this Ascendancy tree, you could just take 1, 2, 3, 4, and that is your self-contained player-only Ascendancy. You are getting the extra fizz damage. And again, you can choose whether you want to go crit or poison. Let me pull something up, which I didn't think to have ready to go, but I should have. So take a look at how this interacts with Venomous Toxins. So this is a helmet. You're adding chaos damage to spells, so there's an incentive there to use a physical spell to poison enemies, and you would take septic spells and you do that kind of thing. 10% chance to gain a power charge on hitting an enemy affected by a spider's web. Look how well this all plays together. Power charges, spider's web. And this would stack with this. You'd get a 30% chance there. 6 to 10% chance to poison per power charge. So there you go. Here's a way that if you wanted to do it yourself, you could use that keystone, right? You could use Perfect Agony. You could do power charge stacking. You can do poison with that power charge. Just to remind you of what Perfect Agony does here again. Damage over time multiplier for ailments is equal to your critical strike multiplier. Critical strikes do not deal extra damage. Non-critical strikes cannot inflict ailments. Perfect for poison. You stack power charges to the moon, you get 100% critical strike chance, and you stack your critical strike multiplier to the moon. Why? Because critical strike multiplier is 1,000,000 times easier to get than damage over time multiplier. There are just so many more sources of it. It is not unheard of to go 500, 600, 700 or more critical strike multiplier, depending on how you build, how expensive it is. So you take Perfect Agony and you turn all that crit multi into damage over time multi. You use Venomous Toxins, and there's one other that I want to... Yeah, so Venomous Weave, I should be pronouncing that right. Venomous Weave, you would ignore the level 20 aspect of the spider skill from this. You would just use the level 31 from your Ascendancy. You get attack speed, cast speed, life, that's all good, energy shield evasion. But 40 to 60% increased damage with hits and ailments against enemies affected by 3 spiders' webs. It takes very little time to build up 3 spiders' webs. Any boss that you're facing will accumulate that very quickly. And 8 to 10 to 13 to 15 chaos damage for each spider's web on the enemy. So you could use this. This might not be best in slot. You'd have to assess, but that's a fair bit of extra damage that you'd be getting there for using that. It's almost like a set from another game. POE doesn't really have set items the way Diablo 2, 3, did 4 ever get sets? I don't know, but we don't really have sets. But this kind of feels like a Venomous set Ascendancy. So yeah, this is kind of split in half. You can use Malevolent Strands to get Envy for your minions if you want. You can get Thread Spinner, Silk Dancer. Take a look at how these are phrased here. So it doesn't say reduce damage to you, it just says deals reduced damage, so that's to your minions as well. It doesn't say enemies affected by your spider webs have negative 15% to all elemental resistances for attacks you do. It's for everything, so this can benefit your minions just as well as you. So this is good stuff, man. I mean, just from these 4 that we've seen alone, I could be sitting here theory crafting for months. This is great. So yeah, video's long enough, but these 2 are way more exciting to me than the first 2 we saw, and I'm definitely looking forward to playing 1 or more of these. So thank you so much for tuning in, and take it easy.